As we look at the world and its selfishness-based systems of operation, there's one thing that we need to keep in mind, and that's this. Selfishness is the ultimate expression of unsustainability. This is because by its very nature, selfishness collapses in on itself. So the things that the world relentlessly pursues, wealth, power, status, fame, domination, those will all come to nothing in the end precisely because they are the very definition of selfishness. Now, selfishness is self-defeating. This probably puts the plainest face on the folly of man's rebellion through sin. This world will end, and judging by the fulfillment of prophecy that we see all around us, it's going to end soon. So what you see behind me, this town, the things around me, the trees, all around us, that's going to end. And judging by the fulfillment of prophecy that we see all around us, it's going to end soon. Now, about 150 years ago, there were Seventh-day Adventists that were meeting. The Adventist part comes from people who believed that Jesus was returning very soon, and the Seventh-day part comes from people who believed in the fourth commandment, worshiping God on the seventh day, the Sabbath, as He commands. So that was about 150 years ago, and they understood that there was work that urgently needed to be done at that time. They understood that we were all warriors for one side or another, and there were also the stakes in this battle. The battle they saw building is now nearing its culmination. That being the case, we live in a time when there are things that urgently need to be done, and we live in a time when we need to see things clearly. So let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at the systems of the world today through the clarifying lens of the selfishness paradigm. And we're going to start with an easy one, capitalism. Now, capitalism is the financial organizing system almost universally employed throughout the world. And quite interestingly, it actually requires selfishness to work. The system requires that everyone act in their own self-interest and that the actions and reactions be predictable and based on this expectation. Capitalism rewards those who try hardest to grasp and hold resources. Now, capitalism itself isn't really good or bad, but if we're going to put things in either a loving kindness paradigm or a selfishness paradigm, in other words, how the earth operates, then clearly capitalism belongs in the selfishness paradigm. Now let's try another one, our political system. Now, particularly as practiced here in America, it's been said that politics is the process that we use to decide who gets what. Perhaps you'll agree that the system as it currently exists is less about competent administration of our civil institutions and more about a fierce competition for power and resources. It's hard to see any loving kindness in this system, so clearly we can put this in the selfishness paradigm category. Ultimately, all of society's systems can be evaluated in comparison to the selfishness paradigm. But interestingly, so can also most of our individual actions. How we drive, to pick something at random. Are we selfish in our driving, or do we express loving kindness? How about our conversations? Do we engage others in order to be able to talk about ourselves, or are we actually interested in the other person and ask after them? How about parenting? If a parent, an overworked parent, a tired parent, but if a parent treats a child dismissively in order to avoid longer interactions and tries dominating them instead of taking time and energy to engage with them, what paradigm does that belong in? What about relationship dynamics between married people? It seems every action, every thought, whether large or small, can fit into one or the other of these two systems. The question then is whether we are intentional, steadily intentional about recognizing this divide and increasingly living our lives in the loving kindness paradigm. If we do that, we'll be trying to be givers of blessings in a world that only takes. No one can do that, at least not for very long. So how can it be done? Well, by fixing our eyes on Christ, by making our relationship with Him our most important goal and our most valuable possession. Ultimately, we must be so close to Christ that He gives blessings through us. That is how we can give and give in a world that only wants to take, because it is Christ working with us and through us who does the giving. That's who He is, that's what He does. How different from the rest of the world are we going to be if we're truly trying to live within a loving kindness paradigm? We're going to be really, really different, that's the answer. We'll truly be a peculiar people in comparison to the majority of the world. But then how else can we be an example? If we are not different as a result of what we believe, then what's the use of believing? After all, Christianity is not some mere sprinkling of pixie dust on top of what the world does and calling it God's way. Ultimately, we are or will be of one paradigm or another. We're going to be either sheep or we're going to be goats. In the end, we either have Christ's loving kindness or we have Satan's selfishness. At the conclusion, there's no middle path, there's no lukewarm response. In this light, the implications of a hard look at our lives through the selfishness paradigm are truly significant, maybe revolutionary. The message is aimed at us from all sides that we should be chasing what the world is chasing. Some even say that the pursuit of wealth is a Christian right and duty, and success is proof of God's blessing. But no, Christ was emphatic that his kingdom was not of this world, and in fact, that is what we're going to be looking at in the next video in this series, the contest between Christ's paradigm and Satan's paradigm in the Bible. How we see both of those at work in the world today, and the challenge of being in the world but not of the world. Join me for the next video in this series.